What happens when the one who should love you most decides you're not worth saving? For Alara Winters, being an Omega meant living in the shadows. She'd learned to make herself small, to move through the Silvercrest pack like a ghost, never demanding, never expecting. For 3 years, she'd carried the secret of her mate bond with Alpha Cade Thornheart, felt it thrumming beneath her skin every time he passed, every time his scent of forest embers and steel filled her lungs. She'd waited, believed that when the time was right, he'd claim her. That destiny would override status. But when the winter solstice ceremony arrived, and Cade stood before the entire pack with another woman at his side, everything changed. And what happens next? No one was prepared for. Because the man who rejected her didn't just break her heart. He shattered the spell that had kept her true nature locked away since birth, and the wolves who found her dying in the snow. They'd been searching for her for 1,000 years. The ceremonial hall blazed with firelight, casting dancing shadows across the assembled pack. Alara stood at the very back, pressed against the cold stone wall where Omegas belonged during formal gatherings. The scent of pine boughs and winter roses filled the air, carefully arranged for the most important ceremony of the year, the Alpha's mate announcement. Her wolf stirred restlessly inside her, a constant ache she'd learned to ignore. The bond pulled taut, singing through her veins as Cade stood at the center of the dais in his ceremonial leathers. At 28, he was everything an Alpha should be. Powerful, commanding, with dark hair and eyes like storm clouds. His scent rolled through the room, forest after rain, smoldering embers, the sharp tang of ozone before lightning strikes. It called to her. It always had. Beside him stood Vivian Ashford, daughter of the Beta family, wrapped in crimson silk that matched her painted lips. Her scent, cinnamon laced with iron, cut through the room with aggressive confidence. She was beautiful in the way of sharp things, all edges and ambition. 3 years ago, Cade's voice rang out, silencing the murmuring crowd. I became Alpha of Silvercrest. Tonight, I claim my mate before the moon goddess and this pack. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She shouldn't hope. She knew better. But the bond insisted, a golden thread connecting her to the man on the platform. Vivian Ashford, Cade continued, and Alara felt the first crack in her chest. Will you accept my mark and stand as Luna of Silvercrest? I will, Vivian purred, tilting her head to expose her throat. No. Alara's wolf whimpered, confused, desperate. Wrong. He's ours. Tell him. Tell him. The words clawed up Alara's throat, but her mother's hand clamped down on her wrist. Catherine Winters's grip was iron, her hazel eyes burning with warning. Don't, she hissed, her scent sharp with fear beneath the lavender perfume she always wore. Don't you dare. But Alara couldn't stop. The bond was screaming. Wait! Her voice cracked across the hall, small but desperate. Every head turned. Hundreds of eyes found her in the shadows. The silence that fell was suffocating. Cade's gaze locked onto her, and for one moment, one blazing, impossible moment, she saw recognition flare in his expression. He felt it too. The bond pulled between them, visible to anyone with the senses to see it, a shimmering thread of gold and starlight. Then, his face hardened into contempt. Alara Winters. Her name on his tongue was a condemnation. You dare interrupt this sacred ceremony? You're my mate. The words tumbled out, raw and pleading. I felt the bond for 3 years. You know. You must know. A wave of scent washed over the crowd. Shock, disgust, dark amusement. Vivian's cinnamon sharpened to something venomous. Cade descended from the dais with deliberate slowness, each step measured. The crowd parted before him. When he stopped 3 feet from Alara, his scent transformed into something cold and cruel. Steel in winter, ash after the fire has died. You? He looked her up and down with theatrical disgust. A weak, powerless Omega? You think the moon goddess would bind an alpha to you? I feel it, Alara whispered, her voice breaking. Please, Cade. I know you feel it too. His hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to bruise. His touch burned through the bond, pleasure and pain warring in her nerve endings. What I feel, he said softly, loud enough for everyone to hear, is insulted. Omegas don't get alpha mates. That's not how the world works. He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling. Her father, Marcus, caught her arm but didn't look at her. His scent, usually warm earth and wood smoke, was thick with shame. Cade turned to face the assembled pack, his voice ringing with authority. The bond can be rejected. It's rare. But within an alpha's power. He looked back at Alara, his storm-gray eyes empty of mercy. I, Cade Thornheart, Alpha of Silvercrest Pack, reject you, Ilara Winters, as my mate. I sever this bond before the moon goddess and this pack. The pain hit like lightning striking her spine. Alara screamed. She couldn't help it. The bond didn't just break, it shattered, every fragment tearing through her like broken glass. Her wolf howled in agony, a sound that existed only in her mind but seemed to shake her bones. The golden thread between them snapped, the severed ends whipping back into her chest with enough force to drive her to her knees. She gasped for air that wouldn't come, her hands clawing at the stone floor. Heat erupted beneath her skin, followed by ice so cold it felt like burning. Something deeper was breaking. Something beyond the mate bond. She could feel it. Chains she'd never known existed, shattering one by one deep in her core. Through the pain, she heard Cade's voice, distant and cold. Remove her. An Omega who would disrupt sacred ceremony has no place in this pack. Rough hands grabbed her arms. 2 guards hauled her to her feet, dragging her toward the massive doors while she was still gasping and shaking. Please. She looked desperately at her parents. Mother. Father. Help me. Catherine turned away, her hand pressed to her mouth. Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes. Your parents understand what you clearly don't, Cade said, his voice dripping with disdain. You are beneath this pack's notice. You are nothing. The guards dragged her through the doors into the winter night. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes. The wind sharp enough to steal breath. They didn't stop at the pack house. They didn't even let her gather a coat. They hauled her past the boundary markers, past the wards that protected Silvercrest territory, and threw her into the snow beyond. Don't come back, one of them said, not unkindly, just matter of fact. Alpha's orders. Any Omega who crosses the boundary line will be killed on sight. Then they were gone, and Alara was alone. She lay in the snow for long moments, the cold seeping through her thin ceremonial dress, pale blue silk that had seemed so pretty that morning when she'd still believed in hope. The pain from the severed bond still radiated through her chest, but it was changing, morphing into something else. That strange sensation of chains breaking continued deep inside her. But she was too shattered to understand what it meant. Get up, her wolf urged weakly. We have to move or we die. Ilara pushed herself to her feet, her body shaking violently. The forest stretched before her, dark and endless. Behind her, she could hear the celebration resuming in the ceremonial hall. Music and laughter, and the sounds of a pack that had already forgotten her. She walked into the trees. The blizzard hit an hour later. Wind screamed through the pines, driving snow so thick she couldn't see 3 feet ahead. Her dress was soaked through. frozen in places against her skin. Her hands and feet had gone numb. She'd lost feeling in her face. Her wolf had gone silent, conserving what little energy remained. This is it, Ilara thought with strange clarity. This is how I die. She couldn't feel the bond anymore. That golden thread that had been part of her for 3 years was gone, leaving only a hollow ache in its place. Maybe that was a mercy. At least she wouldn't die still connected to the man who'd thrown her away. Through the whiteout conditions, a dark shape emerged. The skeletal frame of an old barn, half collapsed, but still offering some shelter from the wind. Ilara stumbled inside, her legs giving out the moment she crossed the threshold. She curled into the driest corner she could find, pulling rotted hay over herself in a futile attempt at warmth. The cold crept deeper. Her shivering slowed, then stopped. That was bad, she knew distantly. When you stopped shivering, you were dying. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her wolf. "I'm so sorry." Her wolf didn't answer. Maybe she was already gone. Ilara's eyes drifted closed. The sound of the wind faded. The cold faded. Everything faded into a gray nothing that almost felt peaceful. Then warmth. Pressure against her sides, her back, surrounding her. The scent of aged oak and winter snow, pine forests untouched by human hands, the electric charge of an approaching storm. It was the most alive smell she'd ever experienced, wild and ancient, and impossibly safe. Ilara's eyes fluttered open. Wolves. Massive wolves surrounded her, their bodies pressed close, sharing their heat. She blinked slowly, her frost-rimmed lashes making it hard to focus. 1, 2, 3. She counted them in her fading consciousness. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 enormous wolves had formed a living barrier around her, sheltering her from the wind, warming her with their bodies. They shouldn't be here. Wolves didn't behave like this. Wild wolves avoided humans, and pack wolves would never leave their territory, especially not in a blizzard. The largest one lay directly in front of her, his massive head level with her face. His fur was so dark, it seemed to absorb light. Not black, but deepest charcoal, with threads of silver running through it. His eyes were the impossible color of amber lit from within, ancient and knowing. Sleep. A voice rumbled through her mind. Not words exactly, but intent translated into meaning. "You're safe now. We've got you." That should have terrified her. Wolves didn't speak mind to mind unless they were pack, but Ilara was too far gone to be afraid. She let her eyes close again, sinking into the warmth, into the steady rhythm of breathing bodies around her. This time, when darkness took her, it felt like falling into waiting arms. Ilara woke to pain. Every nerve ending screamed as blood flow returned to frozen extremities. She gasped, curling tighter on instinct, and felt movement around her. The wolves were still there, still surrounding her. But now she was awake enough to fully understand how wrong this was. She forced her eyes open. Pale dawn light filtered through the gaps in the barn's walls. The storm had passed, leaving everything buried in pristine white. And the wolves, they were watching her. 10 pairs of eyes, ranging from gold to silver to impossible blue, fixed on her with an intelligence that made her breath catch. These weren't animals, or rather, they weren't only animals. "Shifters," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming and cold. The largest wolf, the dark one with amber eyes, rose to his feet. He stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, bigger than any werewolf she'd ever seen. His scent rolled over her again. Aged oak, winter snow, pine, and storms. It was grounding, solid, completely unlike Cade's aggressive embers and steel. The wolf's form blurred, and Alara had to look away from the shift. It felt too intimate, watching a stranger's transformation. When she looked back, a man stood before her. He was older than Cade, maybe 40, with silver threading through dark hair tied back from a face marked by a scar week that ran from his right eyebrow to his jaw. He was built like a warrior, all controlled power and earned strength, dressed in dark leather and furs that looked ancient. His presence was immense, not threatening, but absolutely undeniable. "Alara Winters," he said, and his voice was the same rumble she'd heard in her mind, deep, steady, carrying the weight of years. "We've been waiting for you." She stared at him, still shaking from cold and shock. I don't understand." The man crouched down to her level, careful to keep distance between them, non-threatening despite his size. "My name is Riker Stormborn. I am the commander of the Shadow Guard." He gestured to the 9 wolves behind him, who remained in their animal forms, watching with that same uncanny intelligence. "We have been searching for you for a very, very long time." "The Shadow Guard?" The name tugged at something distant, like a half-remembered dream. That's just a legend. Children's stories." Riker's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Most legends are memories that refuse to die." He studied her face with those ancient amber eyes. "Tell me, Alara, do you know why you were always so weak? Why your wolf never fully manifested? Why you were relegated to Omega status despite coming from Beta bloodlines?" The questions hit too close, too sharp. "I was born wrong," she whispered, the words she'd heard her whole life. "Defective." "No." Riker's voice turned to steel. "You were bound. Someone placed a blood seal on you as an infant, locking away your power, your true nature, your destiny." Alara's hands clenched in the rotted hay. "That's not possible. Why would... Your parents." The words landed like a physical blow. No, my parents wouldn't. They were afraid." Riker's expression was grim, but not without compassion. "The prophecy spoke of the matriarch's return, and when you were born, marked by the moon goddess herself, they knew what you were. They also knew that great power draws great danger. So they bound you, hoping to keep you safe by keeping you small." "I don't have power," Alara said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt it. That strange sensation from the rejection ceremony. Chains breaking. Something vast stirring in her core. "You do now." Riker moved closer, his scent washing over her like a warm blanket. "The rejection shattered the binding. Alpha magic cutting through your own blood. It nearly killed you. Would have killed you if we hadn't found you." His eyes held hers. "Your true self is waking up, Alara. And when she fully emerges, the entire world is going to know your name." A tremor ran through Alara's body. But this time, it wasn't from cold. It was something deeper, something that felt like recognition. Her wolf, silent and small for so long, suddenly moved inside her consciousness. Not weak, not whimpering, but stretching like a predator waking from hibernation. Finally, her wolf purred, her voice rich and resonant. "I thought I'd never be free," Alara gasped. She's different." "She was always this way," Riker said gently. "You just couldn't hear her properly through the binding." One of the other wolves shifted, a woman with short dark hair and eyes like ice, wearing similar ancient leathers. She approached and knelt beside Riker, her scent a sharp winter wind through bare branches. "The question is," the woman said, her voice carrying a foreign accent Alara couldn't place, "are you ready to learn the truth? Because there's no going back once you know. Your old life, such as it was, is over. But the life ahead," she smiled, fierce and proud. That's worth fighting for. Alara looked between them, these strangers who'd saved her life, who spoke of prophecies and power and destiny. Every logical bone in her body screamed that this was impossible, that she should run, that she should dismiss this as a fever dream. But she could feel it now, the power moving beneath her skin like water breaking through ice, her wolf's presence, vast and patient, and finally, awake. "Tell me," Alara whispered. "Tell me everything." They moved to a cave system deeper in the wilderness, far from pack territories and human lands. The Shadow Guard built a fire that filled the space with warmth and flickering light, and as Alara warmed herself, wrapped in furs that smelled of pine and safety, Riker began to speak. 1,000 years ago, he said, there was no hierarchy, no alphas and omegas. Werewolves existed in balance with the land, with the moon goddess, with each other. Our leaders were chosen by wisdom and power, not by who could dominate whom. The woman from before, introduced as Kira Frostmane, added wood to the fire. The first matriarch was chosen by the moon goddess herself. She could speak to all wolves, command any shifter, heal with a touch. She was the balance point, the heart of all packs. When darkness came, another guard said, a young man named Derek with sandy hair and a kind smile. The matriarch sacrificed herself to seal it away, but before she died, she prophesied her own return. Riker pulled out a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. He read, "When the old laws break and the bond of fate shatters, when the powerless find their strength and the rejected rise from snow, the matriarch will return. She will be marked by the moon, blessed with lavender dawn, and her power will eclipse the strongest alpha. She will come when the world has forgotten balance, and she will restore it." The scent of lavender and morning dew suddenly strengthened around Alara. Her own scent, but richer now, more complex. She pulled back the furs and looked at her arms. There, shimmering faintly in the firelight, were markings she'd never seen before. Ancient runes that seemed to be written in moonlight itself, running from her wrists to her shoulders. The marks of the goddess, Kira breathed, reverent. We've been searching every pack, every territory, for someone bearing those marks. But the binding hid them. 10 of us took an oath, Riker continued, gesturing to the other guards. All 9 were now in human form, watching Alara with expressions ranging from awe to fierce protectiveness. "We are the Shadow Guard, descended from the matriarch's original protectors. We swore to find her reincarnation, to serve her, to prepare the world for her return." Alara shook her head, overwhelmed. "I can't be. I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega who—" "You were never an Omega," Riker interrupted firmly. That was the binding speaking. "Do you want to know what you truly are?" Something in his tone made her pause, made her listen. "Close your eyes," he said softly. "Go inward. Find your wolf." Alara obeyed, dropping into the meditative state she'd learned as a child. Usually, reaching her wolf took effort, like calling down a long, narrow tunnel. But now, her wolf was right there, massive and magnificent, waiting with infinite patience. "Hello, little one," her wolf said, and there was such love in that voice, such power. "Are you ready to see who we really are?" "Yes," Alara whispered aloud. "Then let me show you." Power exploded through Alara's body, but unlike the breaking pain of the rejected bond, this felt like rightness, like coming home. Her bones didn't snap. They flowed, reshaping with liquid grace. Fur erupted across her skin, pure white with threads of silver and gold. She felt herself growing, expanding, coming. The transformation should have lasted seconds. Instead, it built in waves, each one adding more power, more presence, more everything. Her senses exploded outward. She could smell every individual in the cave, could hear their heartbeats, could feel the earth breathing beneath them. She could taste the moonlight on the air, feel the pull of the goddess like a silver thread connecting her to something vast and eternal. When it finished, Ilara opened eyes that now glowed like captured starlight. The Shadow Guard knelt as one, their heads bowed. Ilara looked down at herself and nearly lost focus on the shift. She was enormous, larger than any alpha she'd ever seen, larger even than Riker in his wolf form. Her fur shimmered with an otherworldly light, and she could feel power radiating from her, like heat from flames. "We are the matriarch," her wolf said, and the words resonated through the cave like a bell. "We always have been." A howl built in Ilara's chest, not of pain or sorrow, but of recognition, of joy, of power finally unleashed. She threw her head back and let it free. The sound shook the cave walls. It echoed through the forest, through the mountains, through the very fabric of magic that bound the werewolf world. Birds took flight. Small animals fled. And in every pack within 100 miles, wolves turned toward the sound with ancient instinct trembling in their bones. When the howl faded, silence reigned. Then Riker lifted his head, his amber eyes bright with unshed tears. "She is the matriarch," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is returned. We are honored beyond measure." Ilara shifted back to human form. Another smooth transition that left her gasping at how easy it was. Kira immediately wrapped her in furs, protective and maternal. "That," Ilara managed, her voice shaking, "was your birthright," Riker finished. He stood and gripped her shoulder gently. "Everything they took from you. Everything you should have always been." Tears streamed down Ilara's face, not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief. She wasn't broken. She had never been broken. She was powerful, and she'd spent 23 years locked away from her own soul. "My parents," she whispered. "They did this to me. They let me suffer, let me think I was defective, let me be rejected." "They were afraid," Kira said softly, not excusing but explaining. "The binding required a blood sacrifice. Your father's wolf hasn't spoken to him since. That's his punishment. Silence from his own soul. And your mother." She shook her head. "She made herself forget, blocked out the memory, couldn't live with what she'd done. But it's done now," Derek added. "The binding is broken. There's no remaking it. You're free." Free. The word felt foreign. Ilara had never been free. First bound by magic, then by pack hierarchy, then by the mate bond she'd carried like chains. But now, she looked at the Shadow Guard, these 10 warriors who'd waited a millennium for her return. At Riker, whose steady presence made her feel anchored instead of lost. At Kira's fierce protectiveness, Derek's gentle kindness, and the others, each one sworn to her by prophecy and choice. "What happens now?" Ilara asked. Riker's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Now, we teach you to use what you are. And then," his amber eyes gleamed, "then we show the world that the old order is dead. And the matriarch has returned." The days blurred into weeks. Every morning, Ilara woke to the scent of pine smoke and brewing tea, to the sounds of the Shadow Guard preparing for another day of training. The cave system they'd claimed as temporary home was vast, with chambers that stayed warm even in the depths of winter. Someone, Probably Derek, who seemed to have domestic talents, had made her sleeping area comfortable with furs and cushions, had carved symbols of protection into the stone walls. Found family, Alara learned, felt different from blood family. The Shadow Guard didn't bind her with expectations. They didn't demand she be small or silent or grateful. They treated her like she was already the queen she was meant to become, while also teaching her with patient thoroughness. Riker taught her combat. "Your power is immense," he said, as they circled each other in wolf form on the frozen lake that adjoined the cave system. "But power without control is just destruction." She lunged, and he sidestepped easily, using her momentum against her. She hit the ice hard enough to crack it. Again, he sent through the pack link, because she could hear all of them now, their thoughts and emotions flowing through bonds that felt natural as breathing. They drilled until her muscles screamed, until she could anticipate his moves, until she finally managed to pin him, and he grinned with pride. Kira taught her to extend her consciousness, to sense other wolves from miles away. "You're an empath," she explained as they sat across from each other in meditation. "You can feel emotions, sense intentions. Combined with your authority, you could command any shifter to stand down without violence." "And if they don't?" Alara asked. Kira's smile was winter cold. "Then you make them." A woman named Sarah, with copper skin and eyes like honey, taught her healing. "Place your hands here," she instructed, guiding Alara's palms to a wound Derek had sustained during training. "Feel the damage. Now imagine it knitting back together, cell by cell." Golden light flowed from Alara's hands. The wound closed, leaving only smooth skin behind. Derek flexed his arm, amazed. "That's incredible." "That's the matriarch," Sarah said proudly. The others each added their knowledge. Marcus, no relation to her father, thank the goddess, taught her tracking and wilderness survival. "You won't always have shelter," he said. "You need to know how to survive anywhere." Thorn taught her history, ancient laws, the truth behind centuries of distorted pack hierarchy. Ghost, who rarely spoke but watched everything, taught her to move silently, to become shadow when needed. Finn taught her strategy, how to think 3 moves ahead in any conflict. Ash taught her to read territory markers, to understand pack dynamics and politics. And Lyric, the youngest of the guard at barely 30, taught her joy, how to run just for the pleasure of it, how to howl at the moon because she could, how to be powerful without being serious all the time. "You'll be a queen," Lyric said, grinning as they raced through snow-heavy pines. "But that doesn't mean you can't have fun." In the evenings, they gathered around the fire. The Shadow Guard told stories of the ancient world, of the first matriarch and her deeds. They shared their own histories, how each had been drawn by prophecy, by dreams, by an instinct they couldn't ignore. "I saw you in my mind when I was 15, Kira admitted one night. White wolf with starlight eyes. I knew from that moment what my purpose was." "The goddess speaks to those who listen," Riker said quietly, and his gaze on Alara was warm. Different from how Cade had looked at her, not possessive or hungry, but reverent, respectful, interested. Alara felt the bond forming between them slowly, naturally. Not fate-dictated like a mate bond, but chosen. Built day by day through trust and respect and the slow warming of affection. She caught herself watching him sometimes, the way he moved with a warrior's grace, the way he listened when she spoke, as if her words were precious. The way his scent wrapped around her like safety. "He could be yours," her wolf said one night as they lay awake, watching moonlight paint silver patterns across the cave ceiling. Not fated. Something better. Chosen. "Maybe," Alara whispered. "Someday." For now, it was enough to grow stronger, to learn who she was meant to be. The scout appeared on the first day of spring. Alara sensed him first. Her empathic awareness, stretching across miles, had become second nature. A wolf, deliberately crossing into neutral territory, heading directly toward their location with purpose. "We have company," she sent through the pack link. The Shadow Guard assembled in seconds, forming a protective circle around her. But Alara stepped forward, her power settling around her shoulders like a mantle. "Let him come." The wolf that emerged from the tree line was Silvercrest. She recognized the pack scent immediately. Young, barely 20, and terrified. His eyes went wide when he saw her. "You're alive," he breathed. "The rumors are true." Alara tilted her head. "What rumors?" "That an Omega survived rejection and banishment. That she's been seen in the northern territories with a pack of giant wolves. That she—" he swallowed hard. "That she glows." Riker's growl was a low warning, but Alara placed a hand on his arm. "Who sent you?" "Alpha Thornheart." The scout couldn't seem to look away from her. "He orders you to submit to pack judgment. You violated exile." A laugh escaped before Alara could stop it, sharp and bitter. "Tell Cade Thornheart that I submit to no one. This is neutral territory. And I have more right to be here than any pack wolf." "He's bringing a war party," the scout blurted. 25 wolves, including the Luna. They'll be here by nightfall. He says if you surrender willingly, he'll show mercy." Kira's scent sharpened to violent winter. How generous. Alara studied the young scout. Fear rolled off him in waves, but underneath it, disagreement. Anger at orders he didn't agree with. "What's your name?" "Aiden, my lady." "I'm not your lady, Aiden. Not yet." She smiled, and it was kind. "Tell your Alpha I'll be here when he arrives, and tell him to bring his best warriors. He's going to need them." Aiden fled, and the Shadow Guard immediately began preparations. 25 is nothing, Marcus said confidently. "We've faced worse." But Riker looked troubled. "This isn't about winning a fight. This is about revealing yourself to the world. Once Silvercrest knows what you are, every pack will know within days." "Good," Alara said softly. Her wolf stirred, eager and fierce. "Let them know. Let them all know. The matriarch is returning to a world that forgot her. Time to remind them." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson, Alara shifted into her true form. White fur shimmering, eyes glowing with starlight, power radiating like heat waves in summer. The Shadow Guard formed up behind her. 10 ancient warriors, each bearing scars from centuries of service, each deadly beyond measure. And they waited. Cade's war party emerged from the forest just as the sun touched the western mountains. 25 wolves, a significant force for any pack. Alphas and betas, warriors trained and blooded. At the front, Cade himself, massive and dark, his scent of embers and steel preceding him like a declaration. Beside him, Vivian, her auburn coat sleek and her scent sharp with cinnamon and blood. They stopped 50 yards away when they saw Alara. Even at a distance, Cade's shock was visible. He shifted to human form, naked as all shifters were after transformation. But his usual arrogance was muted. His storm-gray eyes were fixed on her wolf form, on her size, on the light that seemed to emanate from her very being. "Impossible," he breathed. Vivienne shifted beside him, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "That can't be the same pathetic Omega you rejected. It's some kind of trick." Alara shifted to human form, and Kira immediately draped a fur cloak over her shoulders, symbolic, more than for warmth. She walked forward until only 20 feet separated her from the pack that had thrown her away. "Hello, Cade," she said, and her voice carried power now, resonated with authority that made several of his wolves whimper and lower their heads involuntarily. "You wanted to see me. Here I am." Cade's face cycled through expressions: shock, confusion, hunger, rage. "What are you?" "What I always was." Alara's smile was sharp. "You just couldn't see it. The binding hid my true nature. But when you rejected me, when you severed the mate bond with alpha magic," she spread her hands, "you shattered the chains." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by regret, so potent she could taste it in the air. No, the prophecy. "You're the matriarch!" Riker's voice cut across the snow as he stepped up beside Alara, still in wolf form, but projecting authority that made every Silvercrest wolf flinch. "She whom your pack threw into the snow to die. She whom the moon goddess herself marked for greatness." "I didn't know," Cade said, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. "Young. If I had known, you would have done the same thing." Alara's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Because you didn't want a mate. You wanted a trophy, someone to enhance your status, not challenge it. You felt the bond, Cade. You knew we were meant to be mates, and you rejected me anyway because I was inconvenient." Shame flooded his scent. Several of his wolves shifted uneasily, smelling the truth in her words. But Vivian snarled, her beautiful face contorted with fury. "I don't care what tricks you've learned or what lies you've spun. You're a thief trying to steal what's mine." She shifted mid-lunge, her auburn wolf hurtling toward Alara with claws extended and teeth bared. The Shadow Guard moved to intercept, but Alara raised one hand. "Mine," she sent. She didn't even shift. As Vivian flew toward her, Alara simply caught her. One hand wrapping around the wolf's throat midair, the other locking around her spine. She held Vivian suspended for 3 heartbeats, while the attempted Luna struggled futilely. Then Alara squeezed. Not enough to truly harm, but enough to prove absolute dominance, and threw Vivian 50 feet across the snow. She hit a snowdrift hard enough to disappear into it completely. The silence that followed was absolute. "Anyone else?" Alara asked pleasantly. Vivian emerged from the snow, shifted back to human form, gasping and clutching her throat. Murder blazed in her eyes, but now there was fear behind it too. "You can't kill me," she spat. "Pack law." "I am above pack law," Alara interrupted, and her eyes flashed with divine light. "I am the matriarch. I existed before your precious hierarchy, before alphas and omegas, before packs as you know them. I am what you forgot, what you buried, what your arrogance tried to erase." She turned her attention back to Cade's war party. "You came here to judge me, to enforce exile on someone your alpha threw away. But let me show you what you're really dealing with." The Shadow Guard shifted, all 10 of them, together. The transformation rippled through them like thunder, and gasps erupted from the Silvercrest wolves. Because these weren't ordinary werewolves. These weren't even powerful alphas. These were dire wolves, the mythic guardians from ancient texts, the warriors of legend. Each one stood over 5 feet at the shoulder, dwarfing even Cade's impressive alpha form. Their fur was threaded with silver that seemed to glow with its own light. Their eyes burned with colors that didn't exist in nature, and their presence was so overwhelming that half the war party involuntarily submitted, their bodies forcing them to bare their throats. Riker stood at the center, his dark fur seeming to absorb shadow, his amber eyes ancient and merciless. "We are the Shadow Guard," he rumbled, his voice carrying to every wolf present. "We have walked this earth for 1,000 years. We have toppled kingdoms and ended bloodlines. We serve the matriarch and the matriarch alone, and if you threaten her again, his teeth flashed in the moonlight. We will teach you why legends survive while empires fall. Cade dropped to his knees in the snow, not gently, not willingly. His body simply forced him down, overwhelmed by the sheer authority radiating from Alara and her guard. Around him, his war party did the same. 25 wolves on their knees in the snow, heads bowed. Only Vivian remained standing, shaking with impotent rage. "Kneel," Alara said softly, and the word carried compulsion, not just suggestion, but command that bypassed free will entirely. Vivian's legs buckled. She went down hard, her knees hitting frozen ground, and tears of fury streamed down her face. "Please," Cade managed, his voice rough. "Mercy. We didn't know." Alara walked to him slowly, her bare feet unbothered by the snow. She looked down at the man who'd broken her heart, who'd thrown her away, who'd sentenced her to death. She felt nothing. The mate bond was gone, truly gone, and with it went the love she'd thought she felt. Looking at him now, she saw him clearly. A man who'd chosen status over destiny, who'd valued appearances over truth, who'd been too proud to see what was right in front of him. "You're right," she said. "You didn't know, but you should have cared. When I told you I felt the bond, you should have investigated, should have questioned, should have wondered why the moon goddess would tie an alpha to an omega." She crouched down to his level. "Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose humiliation. You chose to throw me into a blizzard to die." "I'm sorry," he whispered, and she could smell that it was true. Regret poured off him in waves. "I'm so sorry. I know you are. But your regret doesn't undo the harm." She stood. "However, I'm not interested in vengeance. I'm interested in justice." She turned to address all of them. "Cade Thornhart, you are stripped of the title of Alpha. You will spend 1 year living as I lived, powerless, without rank, forced to endure what you inflicted on others. If at the end of that year you've learned compassion, you may petition to re-enter pack hierarchy. But never again as Alpha." Cade's face went white, but he nodded, accepting her judgment. "Vivian Ashford, you who thought status could be stolen through cruelty, you are banished from Silvercrest. Find another pack willing to take you, or learn to survive alone." "You can't," Vivian started, but Alara's eyes flashed and her voice cut off mid-word. "I am the matriarch. Be grateful I'm showing more mercy than you deserve." She turned to the rest of the war party. "Return to Silvercrest. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them the old order is ending. Tell them—" She smiled, fierce and bright. "Tell them that Matriarch Alara Stormborn claims the Northern Territories as her own. Any pack may petition for alliance, but never again will rank be determined by birth alone. Never again will Omegas be treated as less than. The moon goddess created us equal, and I will restore that balance." "Stormborn," someone whispered. Riker shifted to human form and stood beside her, his hand gently finding hers. "My chosen mate," he said simply. "Not fated. Not forced. Chosen, as the moon goddess intended." The gathered wolves stared in awe as the bond between them glowed softly. Not the golden chain of fate, but silver threads of trust and respect and growing love. "Go," Alara commanded, "and remember this day. The matriarch has returned." They went. All of them, scrambling back through the snow toward Silvercrest territory. Vivienne fled first, her shame and rage a tangible presence. Cade was last to leave, looking back once with regret burning in his eyes, before disappearing into the trees. When they were gone, Alara finally let herself breathe. She turned to Riker, to the Shadow Guard, to her chosen family. "I'm the matriarch," she said, the weight of the title settling over her fully. "And this is my territory." 10 voices howled in response, ancient, powerful, joyful. The sound carried across the mountains, into the valleys, announcing to every wolf within hearing distance that the world had changed. The old order was dead. The matriarch had returned. 3 months later, Alara stood on the balcony of the fortress the Shadow Guard had built, stone and wood rising from the northern mountains, like it had always belonged there. Below, a dozen packs had sent representatives, all seeking alliance, all hoping to be part of the new world she was creating. The laws she'd declared were spreading. Omegas were no longer automatically relegated to the bottom. Leadership was being chosen by merit. The concept of chosen mates, rather than fate-dictated bonds, was gaining acceptance. Change was slow, but it was happening. Riker joined her on the balcony, wrapping his arms around her from behind. His scent, oak and snow and storms, had become home. The bond between them had grown naturally, blooming into something deeper than she'd ever known with Cade. "You're changing the world," he murmured against her hair. "We're changing it," she corrected. "I couldn't do this without you. Without any of them." The Shadow Guard had become her council, her advisors, her family, each one vital in their own way. "Your parents sent another petition," Riker said carefully. Alara tensed. Catherine and Marcus had confessed everything publicly. The binding, their fear, their choice. They'd offered themselves for judgment and asked for forgiveness. "I'm not ready," she admitted. "Maybe someday. But they took 23 years from me. That's not something I can forgive overnight." "That's fair," Riker said simply. He never pushed, never demanded, just supported whatever she needed. A wolf howled in the distance, the evening patrol signaling all was well. The sound made Alara smile. "There's talk of trouble in the southern territories," she said. "Blood moon rising, ancient evil stirring." Riker's arms tightened. "Then we'll face it. Together." "Together," Alara agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him. The bond between them sang with joy and strength. She was no longer the rejected Omega who'd collapsed in the snow. She was the matriarch, the one prophesied, the one returned. She had power. She had purpose. She had a family that chose her and a mate who respected her. And anyone who threatened what she'd built would learn why legends survived while empires fell. And so Alara's journey from rejected Omega to matriarch reached its first chapter's end. She'd learned that true strength came not from the status others assigned, but from the power she'd always held within. She'd discovered that family wasn't defined by blood, but by loyalty and love and choice. She'd found that destiny wasn't always written by fate. Sometimes it was forged in snow and pain and the decision to keep fighting. What will happen as new threats emerge? How will the old packs respond to her new laws? And what ancient evil is stirring in the South? If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, drop a comment telling me what you thought, and share this with anyone who loves werewolf stories with powerful female leads. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in Alara's journey. Because this is just the beginning. The matriarch has much more to do. And the world is only starting to understand what it means when the powerless find their power and the rejected rise to rule. Thank you for listening.